In the heart of the galaxy, among stars and nebulas that few human eyes had ever seen, the Galactic Council gathered. It was a union of the most powerful, the oldest, and the proudest species from every corner of known space. They were beings who had watched countless civilizations rise and fall, and they believed themselves guardians of what they called the natural order. The Council, veiled in tradition and superiority, wielded power like a hammer, deciding which species might flourish and which should be kept in check. For centuries, they'd maintained a carefully managed hierarchy, keeping species who advanced too quickly or threatened the Council's hegemony suppressed. It was their version of balance, a balance tipped in their favor. They did not believe in competition. Instead, they believed in control, ensuring that none would threaten the sanctity of their power. And now, the Terran Empire, a new player in this vast cosmic arena, had come to their attention. Humanity had been a curiosity at first, one of countless upstart species spread across the stars. But then, something unprecedented happened. In a few short generations, humans had accelerated at a speed none of the elder species had anticipated. They mastered spaceflight, colonized worlds, and invented technologies that rivaled those of civilizations millennia older. It was this rapid growth, this unyielding drive, that unsettled the Council. Representatives from each Council species convened to discuss this perceived threat. A stoic, scaled being, the Shaxer envoy, voiced the Council's unanimous concern. To the Shaxer, known for their cunning and cold calculation, humans were little more than children tampering with powers they didn't fully understand. And yet, beneath that disdain lay a hint of fear, a sentiment that echoed through the entire chamber. These humans, though young, had disrupted their carefully maintained order. The Council debated, but it was clear, humanity's relentless ambition was unacceptable. The Council could not allow this new species to continue its unchecked rise, for their own place as rulers of the galaxy depended on ensuring that no other civilization could rival them. A swift decision was made. Humanity would be delivered an ultimatum. They would be ordered to dismantle their fleet, cease technological advancements, and remain confined to their own systems. For the Council, the ultimatum wasn't just a decree, it was a final, unmistakable warning. Disobedience would be met with the Council's full might, a force no civilization had ever withstood. The decision was cloaked in the usual diplomatic language, but the message was unmistakable: submit, or face annihilation. A delegation was dispatched to Earth, and with it went the message of the Council's judgment. Humanity would either surrender its potential, or be crushed beneath the Council's fleet. In the eyes of the Council, this was an act of mercy, a benevolent offer to spare humanity from itself. The idea that humans might refuse seemed almost absurd. Who would willingly defy the ancient Council and bring certain ruin upon themselves? When the delegation arrived, Earth's leaders gathered in tense silence. The alien envoy, the Shaxer representative, delivered the ultimatum with a tone of disdainful authority. He described humanity's achievements as dangerous, reckless, and a threat to the natural order the Council held sacred. There was no room for discussion. Either humanity would kneel, or humanity would perish. As the envoy spoke, his gaze swept over the humans in the room with thinly veiled contempt. To him, they were small and weak, creatures who had not yet earned the right to stand in the same halls as the Council. But the humans did not react with fear. Instead, they listened with a steady calm that unsettled the envoy. These were not beings cowed by threats. Their eyes held defiance, a fire that seemed strange and unwelcome in the face of such overwhelming odds. After the envoy left, Earth's leaders convened, united in a way that transcended borders and creeds. They spoke not as individual nations but as a single voice, resonant with resolve. Humanity would not bow. They had fought wars, survived calamities, and endured challenges that should have broken them. The stars were not the Council's alone to govern, and humanity would not accept a future dictated by a foreign power. Their drive, their innovation, these were the qualities that defined them. The Council's threats, far from intimidating, only fueled their determination. The response was swift and resolute. Earth would stand its ground, prepared for the consequences. Across Earth and its colonies, the ultimatum from the Galactic Council ignited a fire. There was no talk of surrender, no trace of fear. In its place was a shared, steely determination that cut across every line. Humanity had spent millennia reaching for the stars, and they would not be dragged back now. In conference rooms and bunkers, Earth's leaders gathered to forge their response. Politicians and military commanders, scientists and engineers, many who'd once been adversaries, were now allies with a single purpose. Their decision was unanimous: humanity would defend itself, whatever the cost. The Council could keep their threats, the Terran Empire would stand its ground. The call to action rippled out from Earth, spreading across colonies and outposts. From the glittering cities of Mars to the mining stations orbiting Jupiter's moons, humanity responded. No one flinched. No one questioned the price. Across every platform and every screen, leaders broadcast a message of unity and defiance, declaring that Earth and its colonies would resist the Council's tyranny. Engineers and scientists worked without rest, fortifying defense systems and pushing the boundaries of technology. Military bases hummed with activity as soldiers trained for battles they'd never imagined. There was talk of experimental tech, untested prototypes that had once been deemed too risky or too unpredictable. The Council had dismissed humanity's resourcefulness as primitive, but humanity would show them the real meaning of adaptability. Labs became battlegrounds of innovation, as researchers pushed science to the limit. They worked on stealth fields that could hide ships from even the most advanced scanners, and antimatter projectiles designed to breach any armor. A dedicated team worked on weaponizing gravitational fields, creating a defense grid that would distort space itself. Some of these technologies were only half-tested, their risks high, but humanity had little left to lose. And every scientist, every engineer, understood what was at stake. They were fighting not just for survival but for the right to shape their own future. The fleet, which the Council expected to be dismantled, was being armed to the teeth. Human ships, though smaller and less advanced, were equipped with experimental weapons and fitted with layers of reinforced plating. Some of these ships had been built to mine asteroids or haul cargo, but now they were warships in humanity's first galactic defense. In every training camp, soldiers prepared. Veterans who had fought in Earth's wars took younger troops under their wings, sharing their knowledge and experience. There was an understanding that this conflict would be unlike any before. Humanity's soldiers trained with grim focus, knowing they faced a force that viewed them as little more than pests. Yet, there was no fear in their ranks, only an unshakable resolve. Ordinary people were just as involved. Civilians turned their homes into workshops, fabricating parts for drones and weapons, contributing however they could. Factories that had once produced luxury goods were repurposed to manufacture gear for soldiers and medical units. Even in the face of potential destruction, humanity's spirit remained unbroken. Children watched their parents build weapons, repair starships, or sew uniforms, learning that their generation was one that would fight for the right to stand free in the stars. Across the colonies, communication channels crackled with voices from every corner of humanity. Every message echoed the same sentiment: they would resist, they would fight, and they would not be controlled. The Council might have expected fear or submission, but what they had unleashed was a unified defiance that bound every human, across every planet and moon. As Earth's defense forces prepared, the strategies were set in motion. Intelligence officers gathered information, analysts reviewed the Council's known tactics, and a network of satellites and scouting drones was launched to monitor any approaching forces. Commanders worked late into the night, planning complex maneuvers, studying the Council's past campaigns, and predicting how they would approach Earth. The Council had strength in numbers, but humanity had the will to survive. The leaders of the Terran Empire addressed their people, their words ringing out like a vow. They spoke of humanity's history, of triumphs and hardships, of all the times they had been told something was impossible, and all the times they'd proven the doubters wrong. This was yet another test, they declared, another moment to prove that humanity could endure anything the universe threw at it. They called for courage and resilience, for strength and unity, and humanity answered with a resounding cry. This was not just a fight for territory. This was a battle for dignity, for the right to dream, to innovate, to push beyond the boundaries others had set. In every city and colony, people prepared with a sense of purpose, pride swelling in the knowledge that they were fighting for something more profound than mere survival. They were defending the future, their children's future, and the legacy of all who had come before. And so, with defiance etched into their hearts, humanity readied itself to face the Council's might. The Terran Empire would not be shackled. They would not bow. When the Galactic Council's fleet arrived, it filled the skies with an almost surreal density of ships, each one a symbol of the Council's seemingly insurmountable power. Hundreds of massive battleships, carriers, and fighters surrounded Earth and its colonies, stretching across the heavens like a dark, unbroken wall. They were an overwhelming force, bristling with weapons and reinforced with layers of armor that seemed to make them impervious to attack. The Council had brought everything it had, determined to make humanity an example. In their eyes, this would be a quick, decisive victory. They were confident that humanity's smaller, less advanced fleet stood no chance. What they didn't expect was that every single ship in humanity's defense would fight as though it were 10. Human commanders knew they couldn't rely on sheer numbers or firepower, so they employed unconventional tactics. They used cloaking fields to hide smaller squadrons in nearby asteroid fields, setting up ambushes that would strike Council ships from unexpected angles. The first few engagements were costly, as human vessels were forced into battles of attrition. Yet with every clash, humanity's defenders seemed to grow bolder, their tactics more unpredictable, frustrating the Council's attempts at a swift victory. Humanity's forces moved with a guerrilla-like fluidity, striking swiftly and disappearing before the Council's ships could retaliate effectively. Asteroids were weaponized, turned into artillery to hurl at enemy vessels, and every piece of space junk became an opportunity to disorient and overwhelm the Council's forces. They had come prepared for an open assault, a straightforward battle of power, but what they encountered was an enemy that adapted with alarming speed and creativity. The human ships were fewer and often less powerful, but they fought as though they were equal in strength. Commanders on the front lines kept their voices steady and calm, directing their squadrons with precision, their tactics honed from years of Earth's conflicts. Every soldier, every pilot, fought not only with duty but with an intense resolve. They were the last shield between the Council and their home. In the depths of battle, humanity's commanders made use of experimental technology. Gravitational distorters and energy field disruptors, high-risk innovations that even human engineers hadn't fully tested, were deployed, causing enemy ships to veer off course or briefly lose power. Humanity's fleet cut through the chaos like surgeons, exploiting every opening and creating new ones with each maneuver. The Council's admirals were growing frustrated. They hadn't expected humanity to be so tenacious, nor for their own tactics to be so thoroughly outmaneuvered by what they had deemed an inferior force. Some Council ships tried to counterattack with raw power, but humanity's ships moved like phantoms, drawing the Council's fire into asteroid fields and setting up traps that would dismantle the larger ships. It was a grim strategy. Every victory was hard-fought, every maneuver purchased with lives. Losses mounted on both sides, but humanity's forces never faltered. Even when their numbers dwindled, even when the space around them was filled with the wreckage of their own ships, humanity's fleet continued the fight. Human soldiers, who by all rights should have been exhausted, continued to press forward with unyielding resolve. Among the ranks, there was no talk of surrender. Commanders rallied their troops with messages that reached across every channel. This was their chance to prove they belonged among the stars. They didn't fight for glory or conquest but for the simple, undeniable right to exist freely, unshackled by the Council's demands. Victory seemed impossible, and yet humanity's tactics were working. Council ships began to falter, disoriented by the onslaught of strange, unpredictable tactics. One by one, a few of their most powerful vessels fell, each a shock to the Council's admirals who watched their fleet unraveling before them. Humanity had forced them to retreat in certain areas, confounding even their most battle-hardened commanders. This wasn't just resistance. It was defiance, a direct challenge to the Council's claim of supremacy. The losses weighed heavily on the human forces. For every victory, there were sacrifices. Human ships, with fewer defenses and far fewer resources, sustained massive damage. And yet, with each loss, the surviving crews fought even harder, driving the Council's forces back with a determination that bordered on the unimaginable. The battlefield became a testament to humanity's spirit, an unbreakable resolve that no amount of firepower could extinguish. In the heart of the battle, a battered but defiant human commander transmitted a message directly to the Council's flagships. His voice, calm but filled with iron resolve, echoed through every channel, carrying a message that humanity would not be crushed, that they would resist to their last breath. He warned the Council that if they continued, they would see a fight unlike any they had ever known. The message resonated, not as a threat but as a vow, one that reached across the stars. The Council's fleet, accustomed to dominance, had been forced to confront a force that, while smaller, refused to yield. Humanity had turned the Council's own assumptions against them, proving that strength wasn't just in numbers or technology, but in the spirit that drove them to defy the impossible. As the battle raged on, the Council's forces grew weary, their ships worn down, and their strategies crumbling under the weight of relentless human ingenuity. What should have been an easy victory was now a grueling campaign, one that tested every limit of the Council's might. The Council had come to crush a species they deemed beneath them, only to find themselves facing an adversary who would rather be obliterated than surrender. Humanity, against all odds, held their ground. They fought with every last resource, every ounce of courage, defying a power far greater than their own. And in doing so, they transformed from an upstart species into a force the galaxy would never forget. As the Council's fleet pressed in, the battle seemed hopeless. Human ships were scattered, their numbers waning, and the Council's commanders, frustrated by the ongoing resistance, ordered a final, crushing advance. The Council believed that now, at last, humanity's defenses were on the verge of collapse. But amid the chaos, the Terran Empire's commanders made a fateful decision. They had one last weapon, an experimental technology humanity had developed in secret, a device so unpredictable it had been shelved, only to be considered as a last resort. The scientists who created it had warned it could disable human and Council ships alike, a risky, all-or-nothing gamble. Yet now, facing annihilation, humanity was willing to risk everything. In the midst of the fray, the signal was given. An EMP-like wave, designed to pulse through space and disrupt even the most advanced circuitry, was activated. The pulse burst forth, invisible yet devastating, spreading across the battlefield in a matter of seconds. The energy surged through Council ships, reaching deep into their complex systems, scrambling communications, and short-circuiting key systems. For the Council's fleet, the effect was immediate and catastrophic. As the wave hit, dozens of ships went dark, their engines sputtering as they lost power, weapons systems failing. Advanced shielding that had once rendered them invincible began to glitch, leaving ships vulnerable to attack. Battleships that had been advancing with grim confidence found themselves drifting helplessly, their crews frantically trying to restore power, unaware of what had happened. Panic rippled through the Council's fleet as one ship after another lost functionality. The moment of chaos was exactly the opening humanity had hoped for. The surviving Terran ships, though equally battered, surged forward in coordinated strikes. Human pilots, engineers, and soldiers pushed their vessels to the limit, exploiting the gaps in the Council's lines. Disabled Council ships became easy targets, their once unbreachable armor now vulnerable to humanity's focused attacks. Human fighters swept through, launching surgical strikes on critical systems, while the larger ships coordinated to bring down those Council vessels that were still operable. Human commanders coordinated with intense precision. They prioritized targets and directed every available weapon toward the most dangerous Council ships. Some human vessels were sacrificed in the assault, taking on impossible odds to protect their allies, but they moved with a resolve that inspired every soldier, every crew member. Humanity, having faced down the largest fleet in known history, was now tearing it apart piece by piece. The Council's admirals were stunned. They had never seen tactics like these, nor had they anticipated the devastating power of human technology that should not, by all rights, have existed. Communications across their fleet were compromised, and orders were delayed, chaotic. Each attempt to regroup was thwarted by humanity's relentless assault. They had counted on an overwhelming show of force to subdue humanity, but instead, their fleet was being methodically dismantled. One by one, the Council's ships were taken out of the fight. Some attempted to retreat, but humanity's forces intercepted, preventing escape and picking off any stragglers. The few remaining Council vessels managed to fall back, drifting away from the battle with damage that would take years to repair. The mighty fleet, once a symbol of the Council's unmatched power, was left in shambles. A tense silence fell over the battlefield. The human fleet, bruised and battle-worn, held its ground, finally allowing themselves a moment to comprehend what they'd done. Against impossible odds, humanity had achieved the unthinkable. Relief, shock, and an overwhelming pride surged through the human ranks. They had faced annihilation, and instead, they had shattered the greatest fleet the galaxy had ever seen. In that silence, one of humanity's commanders broadcast a message. It echoed across the debris-strewn void, reaching every Council ship still within range. His voice was steady but fierce, filled with the weight of hard-won victory. He declared that humanity would no longer be underestimated, that they would not be ruled by fear, nor would they submit to a council that had sought to destroy them. To the Council forces, the message was both a warning and a statement of triumph. Humanity was no longer a lesser species, no longer a civilization to be controlled or dismissed. They had earned their place in the galaxy by sheer will and strength, and no ultimatum would ever bring them to their knees. And with that, the Council's battered ships turned and began their retreat. For the first time in history, they had been defeated, forced to leave the battlefield by a species they had once considered unworthy of their attention. Humanity, bruised but victorious, stood as the galaxy's newest equal. The aftermath of the battle left an indelible mark on humanity and the galaxy alike. Earth, scarred yet triumphant, became a beacon of resilience and defiance. The remnants of the Council's once mighty fleet, barely functional, limped away from the Sol system, their path a long and humbling retreat back to their home territories. For the first time in millennia, the Council had been forced to acknowledge a species not as a subject but as an equal. Back on Earth, leaders of the Terran Empire addressed their people, carrying a mixture of solemnity and pride. The cost had been great, with countless lives lost, and each leader understood the weight of that sacrifice. They vowed to honor the fallen by never allowing the galaxy to threaten Earth or its colonies again. Humanity had won its right to exist freely, and they would not be caged by intimidation, not now, not ever. The speeches, transmitted across Earth and every colony, resonated deeply. People listened in cities, settlements, and outposts, united by the knowledge that they had survived what the galaxy's greatest force had intended to be their undoing. They had not just defended themselves, they had emerged stronger, more unified, and with an unshakable resolve. Soon, the rest of the galaxy took notice. As word of humanity's victory spread, alien civilizations that had once viewed humanity as little more than a dangerous curiosity now saw them as something more, a force of formidable strength and will. Some cultures, long resentful of the Council's unchecked authority, quietly reached out to Earth's diplomats, their messages cautious but respectful. Humanity's determination had earned a new measure of respect, even admiration, among those who had never dared defy the Council themselves. Earth's leaders carefully handled these diplomatic overtures, recognizing the opportunity they presented. No longer would humanity stand as an isolated young species on the edge of the galaxy. Instead, they would build alliances on their terms, as equals. These new connections hinted at a future in which humanity could help shape the galaxy's political landscape, an influence the Council could no longer ignore. The Council itself was shaken. After centuries of absolute control, their position of superiority had been cracked. They returned to their domains battered and weary, their dominance tarnished, forced to reckon with the reality that they could no longer act with impunity. Humanity, once a small and isolated species, had proven that strength and resolve could rival even the most ancient powers. Within the Terran Empire, a resolve to grow stronger burned more brightly than ever. Resources were poured into scientific research, technology, and defense. Humanity's engineers and scientists, their successes proven in the heat of battle, began developing new ships, weapons, and innovations that would ensure Earth could meet any future threat. The galaxy had shown them the extent of the dangers lurking among the stars, and humanity would be ready. Yet, Earth's leaders tempered their pride with caution. They understood the responsibility that came with their newfound status. The Terran Empire would not repeat the Council's mistakes. They would wield their power with wisdom, knowing all too well the toll of unchecked dominance. They pledged that while humanity would stand guard against any threat, they would not become oppressors. Instead, they would protect their allies and defend their territories with honor and integrity. The battles they had fought were immortalized in stories and histories, shared across Earth and beyond. Monuments were raised to honor the bravery and sacrifices of those who had fought, from the soldiers on the front lines to the scientists who had crafted humanity's last-ditch defenses. Children grew up hearing of humanity's great victory, learning that their people had earned their place among the stars not by submitting to fear but by standing tall in the face of overwhelming power. And with that victory came a profound shift in humanity's spirit. They were no longer just explorers or settlers. They were defenders, guardians of a new age for their kind. Though the Terran Empire remained cautious, there was also a growing sense of optimism, a belief that perhaps, together, humanity could bring about a future that was truly free. In time, more civilizations came to recognize humanity as a power to be respected. They came not as conquerors but as allies, seeking fair exchanges of knowledge and resources, offering partnerships on equal terms. Humanity was no longer merely a threat to the Council's rule. They were a new force that could shape the galaxy's future. And Earth's leaders, with the weight of hard-won wisdom, accepted their new role carefully, their ambitions clear. They would not dominate, but they would never be dominated again. In every corner of the galaxy, whispers spread: humanity, the upstart species from a small blue world, had challenged the galaxy's oldest rulers and emerged victorious. They had redefined what it meant to be a galactic civilization, proving that a species' strength came not only from its technology but from its unity, courage, and unbreakable spirit. Humanity, against all odds, had earned its place among the stars. They were no longer merely inhabitants of a single planet. They were the guardians of a new era, standing as an equal, unbowed, ready to face whatever lay beyond. The galaxy had been changed forever, and humanity stood at its center, bold, unyielding, and free.